Hello, guys. This is Mr. Cole. This is our very first video lecture, so one of many that we will have this school year. So far we have introduced ourselves to one another. We have hopefully done some sort of ice-breaking activity, something like that. And this is our first look at actual content. So before we can actually begin to learn history, we have to understand the way that history is written, how history is understood, and the processes that historians undergo to uncover what happened. Okay, the reality is that you and I were not alive for basically all the events we're going to learn about this school year. And for most of the events in our history, the people alive today were not around for. Okay, so our understanding of what it was like to live in the past is very challenging. And so historians use a number of methods. I kind of just summarize them as historical thinking to describe this. Okay, so I pose a question to you to start. How do we know what actually happened in the past? It's weird to think about, but all of the stuff that we learn in, quote unquote history, we don't necessarily know it to necessarily be 100% true, right? Like we weren't there to see it happen. So most of the history that we get is through an analysis of sources. Those sources can be written documents, they can be pictures, they can be videos. There's just an immense amount of historical evidence that we use to uncover the past. We're like archaeologists, we're like scientists, we're trying to uncover what happened. We don't necessarily know everything that happens, we're looking to uncover it. So I'll pose down a couple other questions. Let's go down to this bottom one. So why do two people who are at an event have different stories? So when we study history, you're going to see that people who lived at the same time, who were at the same events or at the same places, can often see the events or the things that were happening in two totally different ways. And it makes our job as historians very difficult because we have to piece together what happened in the past without being able to go back and talk to the people about what happened. And so we're going to follow a process. The first process is analyzing your sources. I call it sourcing. Sourcing is when we begin to question a piece of evidence, trying to understand if it is trustworthy. We want to make sure that the sources that we use to uncover the past are trustworthy sources. We want to ask who wrote this. What was their perspective? That means like where are they coming from? What's their bias? Why are they writing it? When is it written? Is this a reliable source to use? Okay, we want to make sure that all of our sources that we use, we can trust. This person can tell us what had happened in the past. Now, our sources, we do have to keep in mind that there are different types of sources. We have primary sources, which provide a direct firsthand evidence about an event. So it's something that was directly there at the event that we are studying. That is a primary source. Okay. A secondary source was a source that was not necessarily at the event. Okay, maybe a newspaper article, maybe some sort of textbook or something like of that nature. Okay, these are sources that take other primary sources and summarize them, describe them, analyze them. Okay, but usually everything goes back to that primary source. Now, one is not necessarily better than the other. We'd love to have a primary source, okay, but then secondary sources kind of help us out learning history as well. Now, when we're looking at a group of primary sources, okay, our other two steps we have to take. Once we have the sources, we know that they're good, right? We know they're reliable, and then we read them, okay? And as we read them, we want to keep in mind two different things. The first one is called contextualizing. We will understand that when we're reading a historical document, what is going on at the time this document was created, okay? Nothing ever happens in a vacuum. Right? Even the events, the text messages, the pictures, the memes that you post are influenced by the events happening around the world. The memes that were being posted in 2019 are a heck of a lot different than the memes being posted in 2020 when we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic, right? That would not make sense if you did not understand that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. So you got to understand what is happening around the world at the time this document is created because it explains the document for us. We also want to look at a corroboration. We don't want to only study one source. We want to see what multiple sources say. The more sources that agree with one another, the stronger that argument is, right? The more sources that say something happened, we can more likely believe that yes, it did happen. So what you do then, all right, is a historian takes these sources, they analyze them, they look at the context of when it was happened, they try and find multiple sources, and then they take and make a thesis, an educated guess, okay? And that guess is what we call history, right? We have a guess about what happened in the past. Now, there are some things of history that are really, really easy, right? There are some things we know happen on certain days because there's a ton of historical evidence that said it did, right? Like we know, for example, that D-Day, the invasion of Normandy during World War II, happened on June 6, 1944. Well, that's pretty obvious because we have a ton of evidence that shows it happened. Videos, photos, all these things. There are other things of history that are a little bit harder, though. Okay, and we're going to get into some of those. So I'm going to leave off some examples. Okay, but these are things that require quite a bit of analysis. For example, I'll ask you later on in the year why the United States invaded during a certain war. Who won Reconstruction, the North or the South? I mean, there's all sorts of different questions I'll pose to you. Those require a little bit more analysis, and that's really what we're going to make our money at as historians. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to have a lunchroom activity. We're going to assume, I know you guys would never do this, but we're going to go ahead and assume that there was a fight in the lunchroom, and we're going to analyze that fight as if we were a historian, trying to piece together what happened using only primary sources, using our contextualization, our corroborating, our sourcing to determine what went wrong. Okay, and we'll have a discussion about history in the lunchroom. We'll simplify it down to that. Okay, so that's your first video. Great job, guys. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.